record. All right. So welcome everyone. My name is Romina. I am a Muse member, such as most of you or some of you. So welcome to everyone who is a member and all of our guests as well. I am based in Toronto. I have a company called Eco-Friendly Events where I plan and consult to make events more sustainable. I'm excited to introduce our guest speakers, Marley and Stephanie. So I'm going to hand it over to you both. And off we go.
Thank you, Ramina.
Thanks
I
so
guess
much.
I'll
Yeah, go
it was Marley and I have worked very closely together now for a number of months now, over a year it's been since we started. So we might interrupt each other at times because we know what each other are thinking same time. But my name is Stephanie Katsaros. I'm born and raised in Chicago, working in sustainability since 2009. I started a business called Brightbeat. And coming from concerts and special events, it really was, how do I change the productions that I know about, but have really grown into doing a lot of work with public sector, large scale events, but also kind of policy and standards for cities, counties, and states, while also working on the event side. That's my intro. I'll pass it to Marley.
Oh, hi, everyone. So yes, very grateful to be here. My name is Marley Finnegan. Most of you already know me. I am the founder of Purpose and Purpose Net Zero. And we're going to get into a little bit more about Steph and my collaboration, but we wanted to kind of highlight one of the biggest successes of our very comprehensive sustainability strategy for the DNC being food rescue as both a social responsibility and a very critical climate solution.
So really, what's interesting about the DNC is that it sounded and looked like a really big event. It was a citywide event, and being hired as the sustainability advisors, we were empowered to really recommend a strategic approach. And we were focused on reducing emissions and waste and overall negative impacts. But really our goal were the positive sides. What were the positive outcomes we could create by doing this work? And education was the cornerstone, emphasizing, to the host committee that this was elemental to execution, education itself, and really fostering a legacy of sustainability, a culture of sustainability, which is the work that, I've been doing for years, and Marley as well. We wanted to make this city better after this event was over. And that's what drew me in to partner with Marley on this. So, we've told this story a few times now in Chicago. The Wasted Food Action Alliance in Illinois, and the composters liked hearing about it, and others, but this is focused not only on food rescue, but kind of the behind the scenes, which you guys will get. You kind of know what it looks like when you go behind the drapes, or behind the curtains. So that's what we're going to share with you, and very open to sort of questions and real world discussions about our experience and what we took away from it. So,
Yeah, so sorry. So the pitch really was about collaboration. As we all know, Stephanie has been in business for 15 years, doing amazing work at Chicago-based large-scale venues, as well as various concerts and stadiums and different types of music and entertainment-related festivals, whereas I came more from the business meetings and events side of things. And really, we didn't know each other. Our kids happened to go to the same daycare at one point, and we realized that we lived 2 blocks from each other, and we were doing the same garbage cleanups on different days of the weekend. So we had lunch, and basically when this pitch came through, or the RFP for this project, I approached her and said, hey, would you collaborate? And we both agreed that collaboration is so essential and foundational. And it was the first time that 2 companies had really come together to offer this. And the other thing that was really interesting was a lot of questions were being asked about sort of our experience with, a 50,000 person convention of this size. And the funny answers were sort of like, this is a first. This is a first for us. This is also maybe a first for the world in some ways, and some of the things that we were thinking about doing. So we also, as Steph mentioned, we're really focused on community and on what is called the Change Maker Mentorship, which Steph will go into now.
Yes, so I'll give a shout out to Malik Coburn, who's here with us today too. He has worked with Brightbeat for years, and he led our Changemaker Mentorship Program, which was designed and intended to, the terminology we used, cultivate future sustainability leaders from underserved communities. But what it really meant to us was having mentees be educated by a mentor who, like us, is learning as we all go how to be stronger and more impactful in the work that we do, helping them to also gain practical knowledge, not only contribute to the sustainability impact, but also gain hands-on experience and respect from other professionals in the industry. And a lot of times it's who you know. And so part of what the Changemaker Mentorship involved was giving them a sense of comfort around the language and around the expressions and things you need to know. And then hands-on, they literally, after day one of us all working together at McCormick Place and United Center, kicking off the DNC, they ran the show for zero waste execution at McCormick Place for the following 4 days. It was amazing. I mean, we were getting accolades like as recently as yesterday from folks at McCormick Place saying how great they were. So the Changemaker Mentorship Program to me is important because it's a way we can think about bringing the next generation with us to do this work. We were talking before things got started today about how, it's evolving to where people actually want to invest in sustainability now. Well, what a great time to be nurturing those who will become our, contractors or clients or friends and partners in the future. So the scope of the project was fulfilling the commitment to be the most accessible, equitable, and sustainable convention in history. They committed to that before they hired us. So we had no choice but to make it good. And the first step was really developing the scope of work for them on what sustainability could be reasonably executed with about the 4 months we had to put it together. Budget constraints, capacity, the highest level of security priorities all came into play in what we attempted to do. There's tons we wish we could have done, but couldn't happen in the time frame that we had, et cetera. So we were responsible for event sustainability practices at the key convention venues and really proving out that this could be done at large events because there is related policy in the state of Illinois that went into effect just while we were working on the DNC. It was signed last June that event facilities with 3,500 or greater capacity must recycle and compost throughout the venue in the state of Illinois. So we kind of proved it could be done. And additionally, really doing the heaviest lift on waste was by design in terms of what we executed ourselves because we wanted it to be done right. And we wanted to set these kind of legacy standards. Additionally, in the scope, community engagement was a very big deal. And that's where the Changemaker mentees came into play, working with community. We wanted to identify and share stories so that just like today, the data and the training manuals and stuff are great, but really understanding who is impacted and how we can work together to get things done was something that the city wanted and the host committee wanted us to do, and we did. And then, really recognizing it was interesting, the feedback we get from our client was that, gosh, it all comes down to communication. Yes, we know this. So being that communication was a key function really for every aspect of this strategy, we'd come back around to this time and time again, eventually having weekly meetings with the comms team to really make sure we were embedding sustainability messaging into how the event would take place. And lastly, the collaboration with the city of Chicago was truly critical. And one of the most gratifying things was seeing the city really take this on. The Department of Environment didn't exist in Chicago for a number of years and just came back, but Department of Transportation, which, cares about bus idling. We advanced, I think 1,600 hours of bus idling was avoided through some standards that maybe existed but weren't enforced, or really micromobility, supporting what we have here and getting the word out using combined messaging, unified messaging, so that anywhere in the city, you knew if you were at the DNC what paths you could take to ride a bike and where the e-bikes were and things. So really kind of honing in on all the ways the city could take part in this together and just getting them together. I mean, they planted over 2,000 trees and did these other initiatives, but they also learned how to talk and listen to each other. So that was really exciting. So it was often just like my conversation. It's hard to not be broad. Like, we want to have the broadest impact. We were excited that everyone was kumbayaing around this, but we had to create a strategy with as our guidepost, with distinct milestones and targets. So Marley will tell you about it.
Thank you. Thank you, Steph. So, as mentioned, we came on board about 4 months in advance, and our priority was to reverse engineer our strategy based on the largest emissions impacts. So the largest environmental and social impacts associated with the events, actions, footprints, stakeholders, suppliers. And as Stephanie mentioned, it really came down to educating the various partners that were already in place and really prioritizing how we would minimize impacts in ways that maybe these suppliers had never been forced to look at or really had someone sort of evaluating their outcomes. So, we looked at that as travel, energy, sourcing, food, waste, water, as well as the community and social focused impacts. So we created and developed a number of different educational tools, both for the internal DNCC and host committee, the internal stakeholders, as well as for all the various supplier stakeholders, for the venues, for the food service operators, for all those really, frankly, associated with the event, to support and enable behavior change. And then, of course, our communication strategy also encompassed all of the attendees and the various ways to support them in making conscious choices around how they were going to actually travel to the event, the ways that they would travel on site at the event. And we also supported the hotels in which all the attendees were staying at with their sustainability strategy, and in terms of just providing them with a lot of information. We really also, as mentioned, of course, we focused highly on food rescue throughout all of these facilities. And so one aspect of innovation was, for the first time in history, we measured the attendee travel footprint of about 20,000 people. So we measured the travel footprint for all of the delegates from all 50 states, as well as all of the volunteers that came in for the event from various parts of the world, and of course, domestically. And so we developed what we called a carbon insetting program. It was called the TCII, Travel Carbon Insetting Initiative, and it was developed in tandem with the communications team for the DNCC and DNC. And really what our intention was to take the concept of carbon offsetting, take the measurement associated with the dollar amount of metric tons associated with that 20,000 person footprint. So we calculated everyone's emissions, travel emissions, at a $15 per metric ton price point, and we put a dollar amount to it. But the intention, rather than, a typical offset that might be outside of the local community or even outside of the country at that price point, we essentially invested in regenerative, organic, urban agriculture on the south side of Chicago that supports local CSAs. So, getting high quality, regenerative agriculture to the local community and families in need that don't typically have access. It supported green jobs and climate resilience education, along with the operational support for a 3-acre urban farm and that soil rehabilitation. So the idea was really around rebranding carbon insetting, which is typically used to refer to decarbonization of a corporate supply chain in some fashion, and use it in a hyper-local way that it was an investment in the community for long-term decarbonization practices. So again, it was just a really amazing thing to be able to do. And this was something that, of course, it took also education of our client and of their understanding of why, they definitely deeply understand the commitment to localized impacts, but basically saying, okay, we're going to measure travel and then we're going to do this other thing. We're not claiming that we're offsetting all of the travel or we're zeroing out the travel, but we are making a really important and intentional impact in this other aspect of community that has really amazing long-term influence. So, and I'm sorry, with the Zoom, I can't actually see something. Just tell me.
Well, you did great. The bottom bullet point mentions micro mobility and travel emissions, which I did touch on that it's kind of wild. Like, when there's a big marathon in a city, Boston Marathon was recently, the streets department has to close down the streets, police and fire, everyone's got to be at the ready. The sanitation department, they all get involved, but no one ever thought to include micro mobility, like you're going to be blocking streets, and the perimeter around the United Center was crazy. I mean, this was all the living presidents were there and everything. So how do you get around it? Micro mobility, and what a great opportunity. So that was the point. That last bullet point was just
Yeah.
touching on ways to be innovative, and really this is where hopefully other events will be going, where we're taking into consideration how we can address other emissions impacts through messaging and integrated sustainability messaging with other, event comms.
Well, and to go deeper on that, we really went very intentionally and worked with the perimeter security folks around giving, bike lots and micro mobility lots and intentional spaces where electric scooters, bicycles, all different types of micro mobility could access a safe space to ride to. And essentially we worked with all of the local electric scooter companies, and we created basically a discount code or a code that could be used in unanimously across all the micromobility partners, that they could also track the usage, and the usage what increased in a really huge and dramatic way. And also, then you can calculate the emissions avoidance from these same people taking a car or another means.
Yeah. And so, I want to touch on two things. I don't know, Romina, do you usually take questions at the end or as you go? What do you prefer?
Usually questions at the end, but if
Okay.
you want to take questions throughout, you're more than welcome to.
Okay, well, we'll stick with what you usually do, but I just want to acknowledge that how much money we donated. We'll get that answer to you, but who we donated to is kind of relevant. And on the previous slide, it mentions Growing Home, and the image that it has there is this organization that Marley kind of already referenced. But what we did in order to pick, what organization, if we really have to hone in our messaging to money being collected and donated to only one player. There is a collaborative grant maker in Chicago, the Chicago Region Food System Fund, which is a combination of different granting bodies who sort of came together during the pandemic to support food insecurity, very aligned, and urban gardening and urban agriculture, again, very aligned with what we believed were some of the legacy interests of highest priority to the host committee, and what we saw as opportunities, sort of that were already growing in Chicago. And so, who we partnered with was someone who not only, was aligned with everything I just mentioned, but also do they have a mechanism to donate with a click? Do they have a website that's sort of easy to navigate, so that these the Democratic Party members and different affiliate groups would be able to very quickly read a message, click a button, Apple Pay some money and go. So it was, when we think about partnerships for large events, that component of it, like how you operationalize donations and how you can pick someone and have it be a strong impact, but also easy to tell the story. was not where my mind usually goes when it comes to community donations. So I just thought that might be worth mentioning to this group. And that also represents like who the players are, which is the next slide. You know, we mentioned, and thank you for your question in the chat, Al. There's a lot of layers and a lot of, octopus arms in the DNC, and production was definitely one arm. Hospitality and them dealing with the food. Delegates was a whole other arm. The communication that goes out to the attendees of the convention itself. The media is enormous population, and they have their own like bunkers and spaces that we had to work on different levels to impact and influence what was procured and used there, what waste handling was there, messaging that went to them, being delicate to a lot of different things. But also, we mentioned the City of Chicago departments, the venue operators, as well as the contractors who built sort of the city outside of the venues. There were layers of GCs and, contractors hired to do things, so that, we definitely knew some of the people who were, putting the stage together inside on like what you saw during the TV broadcast, but then there was all the interviews being held in all these other exterior tents, and there's just a lot. And so really being able to hone in on where we could make an impact and where we could control operations. It's again, I liken it a lot to a marathon or a golf tournament, or something where it's just sort of like big and wide. And how do you, music festival, South by Southwest, these kinds of things where there's formal and informal things going on at the same time. And we really did have to try our best to handle the complexity, but really hone in on not only what we could impact for the DNC, but also like post event report was really focused on the contract language and the RFP language and how critical that is to specifying sustainability implementation and reporting in order for this work to be done. And a lot of it wasn't possible because we were hired after some contracts were already penned. We were one of the first hires, but we should have been the very first. In our opinion, you hire the sustainability consultants before you pick the city. I mean, it'll never happen, but if you did, then you would pick a city where it has the best transportation options. We had the smallest radius. Within a 5-mile radius was almost all the hotels, from the venues to, the hotels. That's amazing. You can't do that in Denver, no shade on Denver. It's just that we had the ability to do that. So really understanding that contractor piece and the communication that goes out to all these levels, all these players, is critical. And one thing I'll just quickly touch on, I feel like I'm talking a little too much, but we did a sustainability roundtable for the DNC hosted by the Wasted Food Action Alliance, which is one of the organizations that we're a part of. So we sort of tapped our networks and spaces where there's convening of interested parties. And we brought about 50 thought leaders, a little more, came to the meeting, and we had the host committee, the Department of Environment, the commissioner of the Department of Environment from the city, and ourselves. And we really walked the community itself, the sustainability community of our city. We walked them through our strategy. We got their feedback on what we've overlooked, what should be, higher priority, and how they could contribute. Because, everyone, it's fine that there's dollar signs in their eyes. They're like, there's a big event coming. I can, get a chance to do, whatever lighting for it, or fabrics, or whatever I do. I have a limo service. And so kind of everyone was looking for a way to get involved. And so at least through the sustainability lens, we helped people realize like what was going to be needed. And through that roundtable, it actually led to some of the subsequent meetings that Malik, who works with me at Brightbeat, and I have been hosting around this Large Event Facilities Act that went into effect January 1st of this year. Like real time, like what Marley and I put together was being like shown as these are standards that events should utilize. So like that's where, that's why we did this. And any chance you have to make an event really set new standards is kind of cool. And it really relies on who you're telling your story to. So.
Well, and just to interject, this list of players, even though it's a long list, is just really the list for the food rescue. This is not a comprehensive list of all the involved parties and stakeholders and fabricators and production. It's a huge, huge amount of people that were involved. So
And
just
I'm
wanted to mention.
sorry, we're talking food rescue. I keep thinking about the whole event, but one thing I didn't mention was how, we talked about security, and Marley will get into the execution of how limited, like how hard it was to get in. So how do you have an impact on community and do food rescue when it's like the one truck in, one truck out? So there's a lot of things that you have to take into account when you're working on food rescue at scale. And yeah, go Marley, you tell them.
Yeah, so because this was the first time that this kind of an operation was done at such scale in terms of the actual sheer quantity of the food that was rescued, and we're going to get to those statistics, but it was also something that we needed to account. There needed to be a budget for it, right? And typically for a small event, it's usually a couple $100. For an event of this size, it was a more sizable budget. And so it was also part of our scope to also figure out, okay, what is the budget for this food rescue? How much are we going to be able to account for? And then really getting that over the finish line in terms of approvals and what's the plan. And so what wound up happening is that I, in my very own car, drove thousands of sheet pans through Secret Service 3 times, which was kind of hilarious. And these are just like behind the scenes things that were happening because, logistically, again, it's really complicated to get, through the perimeter. And we learned this also through the fact that we had accounted for 10 people per night to rescue food and to go to the kitchen with us and help with all the replating and repanning of the food. And then when we're on site, being that we had not had this role before, we realized because the security is so tight that Malik, Stephanie, and I's security passes are the only ones that can access the kitchen because the kitchen is on the VIP suite level versus, so, these 10 people that we had accounted for being our helpers, it wound up being the 3 of us every night, which was amazing and very good team building, but also something we wouldn't have planned that way. So, it's just kind of the amazing thing about learning on the fly. And then we really had the team from the United Center step up, the warehouse team there, which we'll talk about as well. But we also we worked really hard to get 1,000 sustainability volunteers to both have an education, a crash course education on sustainable event strategy and their roles relative to both basically becoming eco educators at all of our waste diversion stations, as well as understanding food rescue and what that meant. And even though we couldn't include those people, we ended up folding them into other roles, or they, essentially they did deeply understand the purpose. But it was such a beautiful experience to involve all these people. And really what we wanted to do with this was also share perspectives of the venues and share the perspectives of the beneficiaries as well. So with the United Center, we worked with food technology partner Copia to essentially orchestrate thousands and thousands of pounds being taken directly from the United Center cold storage through and I'm missing the word, but a credentialed food truck driver every day. So these people had to be credentialed with 24-hour plus security approval, had to be the exact timing. There's so many different things going on. There was one point where we were trying to get somewhere and it was Joe Biden's whole team coming through down the dock, so it's like, there's just so many moving parts, but essentially we were processing at the United Center about 4 to 6,000 pounds of food per night, and about 8,000 or 18,000 pounds over the duration. And the critical thing was understanding and and prioritizing where we could get cold storage, where we could keep food safe, both from the interior and the exterior. So the exterior had 5 different main food activations with multiple different caterers and food service providers, all with different schedules and meal times and everything else. So it was this huge amount of coordination that we really took into account. Luckily, Copia was able to organize where we could get one pickup for all the food, and then that got redistributed out to, over time, 26 different nonprofit beneficiaries that were hyper local, both to the United Center and to Chicago. One thing to note is a lot of times there's almost criticism of like, well, why was there this much food left over? And usually there's 15 to 20% in overage just due to guest count uncertainty. And the United Center had about a 12 to 15% overage, which is on the lower end of surplus. And that was taking into account that there were concessions, event spaces, various suites, and VIP. And then the other thing to just touch on that I added was that we did fund renewable energy certificates for 56 days worth of stadium and arena usage. And we also utilized shore power energy. So we pulled basically grid power energy to power all of the exterior media related. So we basically could minimize and avoid the use of generators in a very, very massive way. And I'll throw it to Stephanie to talk about McCormick Place.
Great. So with McCormick Place, we are fortunate that since COVID, an organization called Fight to Feed, when things shut down, there was a kitchen that was not being used, and there was a groundswell of community activism around moving. Like in the short term, it was like the dairy and the other, just imagine the conventions thought, there was a convention next week and now there's none. The schools thought, I mean, you guys experienced COVID. So that's when Fight to Feed really came into being. And they are, to this day now, since 2020, have been in the East Kitchen at McCormick Place, and they are able to receive, because you can imagine what a dock at a convention center would be, sort of trucks, donations by the truckload, donations by the pallet, and they have the ability to go out. They don't just service Chicago and neighborhoods in Chicago, houseless, which is kind of their priority, but they do service even into other cities and counties in Northern Illinois. And they have the ability to receive food from conventions. And so we did tap into that infrastructure when we were at McCormick Place. And also, so much has changed even since August. The process of donation between a convention and Fight to Feed was quite informal since 2020, previous to the DNC. Whereas, like I work with Salesforce, say, and so we as the event are coordinating with the donation partner directly and having to like sort of navigate to connect and receive food. But this is a convention center who already has people moving around, and they were able to formalize some of the processes to support the donation work that Fight to Feed is doing and really strengthen and increase the number of pounds, where Jackie, the sustainability director, who came on a couple months before the DNC, but like weeks before she met us, she started, and they're now up to doing an average of 20,000 or so pounds of food per week in donation. It's not because of the DNC, but it's these pathways that we can create through events that really showed to be a major legacy. And additionally, during the DNC, there was an ability to handle and manage food differently. The compostable packaging that was used, we worked with them on, which is so much easier said than done. Anyone who's ever had to deal with it, you know that the catering department, I mean, there's just a lot of execution around working with teams and making sure they understand that, certified compostable packaging is either a yes or a no. And if it's a no, then the eco educators are going to have to hand sort out every PC that you put in that compostable lunchbox. And that's the kind of thing that our eco educators were doing there. But on the food rescue side, we really were able to move carts, and it wasn't perfect, but with the errors that occurred, it really helped strengthen, again, like what's happening there now. So they've got on-site composting happening now. We launched it there. They're doing some AI recycling front of house. And really, I think the main takeaway is that kind of pathway of protocol within the venue that connects not only, directly the food recovery or food donation recipient to the events that come through town, but also having something kind of baked in for the food service operator to provide it as part of the catering package, so that when it comes to food donation, it can get built into the menu planning and the, sort of breakdown schedule and things like that.
I just wanted to intervene and say this photo down here is not from the DNC. We had all compostable packaging for all food service at both venues. And this is just to show the sheer scale of obviously what's happening every day. And a large majority of the time, this food is not going to local communities. So.
Yeah,
Steph,
and thank you. Yes. So, we did talk about how the community partner Growing Home was sort of handpicked to be a really great partner for donation. Similarly, and this kind of goes back to United Center, Franciscan House, our Franciscan Outreach is a partner, a very important community entity in Chicago that serves houseless individuals. They really do a lot of kind of wraparound service that goes far beyond providing food. They were, we've worked with them before on other projects. They work with hospitals, at any time they have institutional opportunities, they're really excited about them, largely for the fact that it gives diversity to their guests when it comes time to eating. And the way they speak, the language that's used, Franciscan Outreach really speaks about their guests and the guest experience and the importance of, it's hard enough to bring yourself maybe to a soup kitchen or a food shelter, or to, seek assistance when you need it. And if you're getting the same thing every single day, it doesn't feel great. However, when there is something unique and it's healthy, it's out of the ordinary, it brightens their day, it changes their mood, it changes their life. I mean, this is the way our partners at Franciscan spoke, and just, to build their morale, to lift their spirits was amazing. And then on top of it, that shelter or that organization was going to pay for food to feed them anyway. So now they've also saved money because they received healthy, nutritious food. And that's where, advocacy and policy around requiring food donation or supporting, the growth of food donation, when it's done right, these organizations really want it. And so I'll kind of pause right there.
Yeah, I loved to hear that basically these guests, it was described that they feel as if they're getting a restaurant experience, and just the description of the way that it changes their energy to go about their day, to feel like they are having this beautiful, important experience, and just feeling really dignified in that moment to be able to go out and go, try to look for a job or go try to do something a little bit differently, which I thought was really amazing and inspiring. And, it's such a responsibility of our industry to continue that momentum. So as far as the rescue outcomes, just for food rescue alone, and we have an entire DNC sustainability report that's like 30 pages long that we can also share out as a resource following this. But we rescued over 27,000 pounds of food in a matter of just a few days or a week's time from 3 Chicago staple venues. We fed over 23,000 Chicagoans, which avoided 96,000 pounds of CO2 from being created in landfill. And that food alone saved 5.3 million gallons of water from being used in food production. And all of these statistics were thanks to our partnership with Copia. And we also used Carrot for a couple of the rescues at Navy Pier as well. So this is the kind of statistics, that are really pretty undeniable and speak volumes about the opportunity for social responsibility and, food rescue as a climate solution, frankly. So I will pass it to Steph.
And I've talked a lot about legacy this whole time, so I won't kind of, rehash the excitement around the impact on the city at these events. Front of house recycling at Wrigley Field is a thing now. It got launched at the Volunteer Appreciation Party the week of the DNC, or I should say the day before the DNC started. And Marley mentioned Navy Pier, and Carrot had already been doing donation pickups, but the comfort that the food service operator there has with rescue and how to prepare for it, only grew through what we all did together. And, really, I think being able to have a case study is one of the greatest outcomes and one of the things we look for to give to others and receive from others. Everyone just wants proof that it can happen, and so that's what we hope to by sharing this, we hope to provide. And then also really the partnerships that came out of it is the local excitement. How can we, if we created new partnerships, because Franciscan House, which had picked up or received food from United Center a couple times, now they have a new partnership. Like, that's one thing, but that's how an event is a, transformative opportunity. It's one-off, but it can become SOP. So that's really where we felt the community, the city, and, sort of the industry, if you want to call it that, was able to see that food rescue can work, that the reporting on it can be provided, and that it can be created as a toolkit and can be replicated. And so that's really, what we hope to be the legacy of the work.
And one thing I think too, as Stephanie mentioned, we were in very close proximity / relationship with the comms teams about all of this information and really about how to communicate this. And, of course, when we came out, we kind of came out with a no beef. And really that was like, we can't say that, and not that they were saying that. They're like, but so what's the right thing to do? They really kind of helped us see that, okay, saying that chicken and fish are the lowest emissions meat, if you do need to choose meat, is a much better way to communicate that type of a message. And what wound up happening is that we did say, hey, choose chicken and fish on your menus. And it wound up not saying anything about beef at all. I think over 80% of the food served at the DNC were what we would consider lower emissions meats. So less than 20% beef served. And that beef, all that leftover beef, made it into these beautiful, amazing, nonprofit beneficiaries where they felt like they were having the most amazing restaurant quality meal. So, it's a win in that regard as well. So in closing, we just feel so passionately, this is both a very hot button issue for the both of us, around the fact that this is not only such a huge climate solution, but a social responsibility. And knowing that events the world over are typically seeing, 15% to 20% in food surplus, how can we as an industry really embrace this idea of, operationalizing this into our business models, adding that little extra cost that's associated with the labor and the equipment necessary to donate. There are multiple different food donation technologies that exist now that some of them are free marketplaces, others are paid, and it's a guarantee that someone's going to pick it up. So, you can build this into your proposals, build this into your models to ensure that it is a slam dunk. And you can also pay forward the statistics and the benefits to your clients and to your community in huge ways. And then, yes, we did not know about the balloons. I did get some like hate mail though from somebody. Anyway, Steph, any other closing thoughts?
No, I think you summarized it up really well. It's just, looking at each event as an opportunity, and it's just, we've been doing it wrong for too long, if I dare say. So yeah, no, that's it.
Awesome.